Which year two running back from the 2023 NFL draft class is primed to have the best 2024 NFL season? We're going to talk about this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout for being our everydayers. And you know I got to kick the intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at The Talent Code. Keep talking to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, the other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to say shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. Go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to comment and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On NFL Draft. This is about to be an action-packed show. Yesterday, we did which year two quarterbacks will have the best 2024 NFL season. This time, we're going to switch. We got to hand the ball off, hand the rock off to those running backs. So we're going to talk about which year two running backs will have the best 2024 NFL season. Obviously, guys that we evaluated, that we talked about on this podcast, we're going to talk about, hey, rookie years were good or maybe wasn't so much, but which guys we project to have really good 2024 NFL season. But DP, before we have this conversation, man, why don't you hit them with our title sponsor?
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Best year two season from the 2023 NFL draft for these running backs. Keith, I think when you look at what we saw last year, right? Bijan Robinson, 214 attempts, 976 rush yards, four rushing touchdowns. He had 58 receptions last year as well. Jahmyr Gibbs had 182 rush attempts for 945 rushing yards, 10 rushing touchdowns, and 52 receptions. And then Devon Achane, 103 attempts, 800 yards even, 8 rushing touchdowns. He had 27 receptions. This was a very loaded running back class. When you look at this class yourself and what we saw in 2023, the talent that we know Bijan, Jahmyr, and these other guys are, who's going to have the best season in 2024?
DP, quarterbacks. I said no layups, right? I said we cannot do layups. DP, I'm going straight to the hole, baby. I'm doing a layup with this one. I am going Bijan Robinson. I got to do it, DP. The lane was wide open. There was no right there. The small team, 6'6" center. I got to go to the hole, DP. I got to go to the hole. I'm going with Bijan Robinson. I'm going with Bijan Robinson for multiple reasons. Obviously, who their offensive coordinator is now, right? Just as far as him coming from the Los Angeles Rams, he's going to probably run, I'm assuming, right, the same exact type of offense where it was that kind of zone stretch. And the only comp that I have for this type of situation is inserting this level of talent of a running back being this young is in this scheme is Todd Gurley, right? And when Todd Gurley was fully healthy, he was a guy that was running that Los Angeles Rams team all the way to the Super Bowl. Obviously they came short against the New England Patriots, but I think it can be that type of situation where you're talking about this guy, hey, is he going to be an MVP? And this is the thing, you don't shy away from being all in on running backs that are drafted high and that are young, right? You know what I'm saying? Usually it's that first contract that we always talk about before the wear and tear starts to add up. I just think that this is going to be a really good situation. Now, what's another thing going for him? Like quarterbacks, right? We say other position situations matter. And what's going to happen is the fact that there's a Kyle Pitts on the field. There's a Drake London on the field, right? And so they're going to be opening some things up. He has Kirk Cousins at quarterback. I don't think you can just sit there and have 8-man boxes the entire game, right? Because you have to worry about Kirk Cousins, and you can feel how you feel about Kirk as far as what he does in big moments and playoffs and all that other things. During the season, regular season, the guy gets the ball to his playmakers, right? You don't get very many receivers that complain because they usually do really good numbers throughout the season. So I'm going to go with Bijan Robinson for all of those reasons. And you throw on the fact that the guy is just supremely talented. He's special, best guy we've seen probably since Saquon Barkley and all the things he can do. You outlined the numbers at the top of the show. So I feel like that part doesn't need further explanation, but I'm definitely going Bijan Robinson, who I think will have the best 2024 season.
Yeah, I'm going with Bijan as well. Like you said, I'm in the layup line with you, Keith. You know what I'm saying? Go ahead, just pass the rock to me, and I'm gonna go ahead and get that finger roll off the backboard. I think it's, and don't get me wrong, like I said, talking about the numbers, like Jahmyr had, not even just an equal as good season, but like he had bigger plays in the run game. I think he averaged a couple more yards, like than Bijan as well. But for me, is what you said. Adding him to putting this Zach Robinson, Sean McVay, that stretch zone run scheme. You brought up Todd Gurley. I'm gonna bring up a different name. He's the best running back in the league right now, Christian McCaffrey.
Okay.
This is what we can see. I think that's the ceiling for Bijan in this type of offense. I want to see them throw they threw the ball to him well enough last year. Throw the ball to him even more. At the end of the day, like Brock Purdy gets all the love in San Fran, but man, when you watch that tape, how they get the ball to Christian McCaffrey is a headache for defenses to prepare for. It's not just the run game. It's not just the screen game. It's we're going to rail route this thing. We're going to whip route it. We're going to throw them in different positions to catch the ball and make plays in space too. And Bijan has that same type of talent in terms of being a dominant runner, a guy that can run with power, run with elusiveness, run with speed, make big plays, and also the pass catching ability in open field. So when I look at it, I'm like, man, I'm excited for him in this offense, because what the big knock on last year's Falcons team wasn't just the quarterback problem. It was the fact that Arthur Smith didn't feed Bijan the way he should have fed Bijan. People are like, yeah, okay, cool. If you wanted to feed Tyler Algier, you should have just kept Tyler Algier's RB1. Like, that's what you should have done. Like, you shouldn't have drafted Bijan 8th overall. No, give Bijan the 300 touches or so. No, don't get me wrong. I'm cool with them preserving his body and stuff like that. Like, you want to get the most out of this young man. He's a game changer. Point blank. He's a game changer. And I get that. But for me, I'm like, yeah, he had 214 carries, 58 receptions. Good enough workload, right? But I think it was very inconsistent snap to snap, game to game with Arthur Smith, where I don't see that being the case with Zach Robinson. We saw what he did with Kyren Williams last year, right? Kyren was the third leading rusher in the league. If you put Kyren Williams side by side with Bijan and you say, hey, I got to draft a running back, who's getting drafted? It's going to be Bijan every time, 10 out of 10 times. So I think putting him in this offense, he is my pick to lead this running back class and have the best 2024 season. But Keith, I'm not gonna lie, Jahmyr Gibbs is right behind him, because I think that he's gonna have a strong year too.
Well, let's talk about Jahmyr Gibbs coming up next, man. Listen, we right on tap, right, as far as RB1, but a guy that's very close in what you said, average more yards per carry, right, and could be in potentially more explosive running back than Bijan Robinson is Jahmyr Gibbs. So we want to talk about what is the outline for Jahmyr Gibbs? What are the expectations for Jahmyr Gibbs? And will he finish as the, I guess, second running back, right, in this 2024 NFL draft class? We're going to have that conversation coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And the summertime is here, but it's not going to stay here for long, guys. Shout out to my fathers. If you're in a city where you can see your favorite MLB team play, guys, why not take the family, take the kids, take the wife out to the ballpark during one of these hot summer days and have a good time? And you can get those tickets and take the guesswork out of buying those tickets, buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Just all you need to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Guys, download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Detroit Lions running back Jahmyr Gibbs, Keith. And I said the numbers at the beginning of the show. I'm going to say them again. 182 carries, 945 rush yards, over 5 yards per carry, 10 rushing touchdowns, 52 receptions, 316 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. He had 11 touchdowns total. And remember, this was a guy coming in at 5'9", 200 pounds. People question, could he actually handle an NFL workload? I think he kind of proved that last year, that he is also a game changer, right? Like the David Montgomery, I remember what was the first 3 to 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks of the season, David Montgomery was the guy. And people were like, oh, man. So you telling me we're not going to get, especially fantasy people, like, I'm not going to get the bang for my buck with Jahmyr Gibbs. I drafted Jahmyr Gibbs for nothing. Pump the brakes, guys. Give it time. And you saw Ben Johnson incorporate Jahmyr Gibbs into this offense, and what he brings in similar kind of run scheme too, like that, a lot of stretch zone type of stuff. They run toss sweeps, crack toss, things like that, get him on the perimeter, but allowing him to be an improvisational runner. Whereas, like, yeah, if I'm supposed to hit the outside, but if they have leveraged the outside well, let me peek back inside to see what these linebackers are. Oh, they're out here, cool, I'm gonna cut this up and I'm gonna create big plays. And this is a young man that, for me, I think he is. And him and Bijan, it's crazy because, like, we typically talk about this with quarterbacks. When Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota went back to back in terms of draft picks, they're tied together for the rest of their careers, right? Yep. Tua, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, tied together for the rest of their careers. This year, for 2024, you got Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Caleb Williams. Last year, Bryce, CJ,
Bryce and CJ.
Like, Will Levis can't short him either. Like, all these guys are gonna be tied together. It's gonna be the same thing for Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs at the running back position. Bijan went 8th overall. Jahmyr went 12th. 4 picks later, we had 2 running backs in the top 15. I think what Jahmyr Gibbs showcased last year is, Ben Johnson, give me the ball more. And I think, and that was the looking at the numbers, that was the confusing thing, is Jahmyr had, not confusing in that sense of like the rushing, the yards more yards per carry, because he's a more explosive player than Bijan. But Bijan had better numbers as a receiver in terms of yards per catch. He was at almost 2-3 yards more, where they just used Jahmyr as a check down option. And it was like, no, like, he's like, if you watched him at Georgia Tech, if you watched him at Bama in 2022, you saw what he can do. So I think he absolutely has a clear path to be the second best running back out of this class in year 2. But I will say, he could give Bijan another run for his money. And that's only if Ben Johnson feeds him as RB1. If it's still split between him and David Montgomery, then yeah, I think Bijan will outpace him in terms of total yards from scrimmage, because they're both of them all-purpose backs, right? But I think if they feed Jahmyr at a high clip, or more than, like, as him as RB1, he could have a chance to leapfrog Bijan.
Yeah, so I agree with all of your points with Jahmyr Gibbs. And part of the reason why I didn't pick Jahmyr Gibbs for the RB1 conversation as far as finishing one is because I think new head coach, new regime in Atlanta, you can expect for this to be the Bijan Robinson show. That's what I think is going to happen with Detroit. Because even, I don't know if you have the stats and pull the numbers, I feel like they started off really slow with Jahmyr Gibbs. As far as feeding him the rock, I think it picked up towards the end of the season. But I can see it kind of being the same thing, to where they like, man, they're going to worry about the wear and tear. The veteran, David Montgomery, they're going to hand him the rock, let him, kind of get things started. I hope that they give Jahmyr Gibbs, because he's talented enough to where it's like, I get splitting the reps, but you got to understand something. Like, you only get one time to run like that play. Like play 23 of the game only happens one time, right? Exactly. And you would hate for like you going, like, this is what you don't want, is that when you're a coach, and this happened at LSU, right? You have substitutions and things like that. So boom, our game would be Saturday, and then Sunday you go watch the film, right? You're watching the film, you're going through it, you're going through clips like, man, what we could have did better, XYZ, and you see a running play, and you have one running back in the game, and you think like, man, if I'd have had that running back in the game, this would have been a touchdown, right? Like if you get a play where it's David Montgomery breaking through the first level, breaking through the second level, and then now it's just him one-on-one with the safety, but he doesn't have the same elusiveness that a Jahmyr Gibbs had, and he ended up getting tackled, right? Something like that. And it's not that Jahmyr Gibbs can't run in between the tackles. Also, in my opinion, he's just one of the most skilled backs we've seen. And then also DP, when we talk about Jahmyr Gibbs, I want to put him there, but even you talk about being a wide receiver 3 or 4, he can be that for an offense. Like I put that in my scouting report, so I don't know why he's not employed in that facet too. The fact that Bijan is outpacing him, I think you said in yards, right? Yards and yards per catch, right? Was something I did not foresee. So the reason I'm not all the way in is just because I don't know what situation they're going to put Jahmyr in. I'm expecting with a new regime with Bijan, they're going to push all the chips in the middle of the table, say, hey, we draft you with your number eight overall pick. Let's give it to him. I think with Jahmyr Gibbs, the Lions are going to probably try to replicate what happened last year or somewhat play the long game with him.
100%. I think that's the drawback, right? It's just like you said, he started off kind of slow. In 2023, week 1, the first game against Kansas City, 7 carries, 42 yards. Week 2 against Seattle, 7 carries, 17 yards. Against Atlanta, he took and felt like they kind of almost not made a statement, but like, hey, we might need to. Bijan across the field, we might need to give you some touches, right? And against Atlanta, 17 touches, 80 yards rushing, but then it went back down the following week against Green Bay, where they beat them by 2 touchdowns. He only had 8 carries in that game, 8 carries, 40 yards, and then you start to see an uptick, and he started kind of toggling and balancing between 11 to 16 carries per game, but then his still getting the receptions, probably 6 to 8 receptions or 6 to 8 targets a game in the passing game. So I absolutely feel like, man, David Montgomery, and it's different if David Montgomery did not play well. He played well. He ran the ball well for the Detroit Lions. So Ben Johnson is looking like, well, I got a 2-headed monster that I can rotate and run with, and I don't have to just feed one specific guy. Where you look at that backfield, I think Tyler Algier is still there. Cordell Patterson, I don't think he's there anymore.
I can't remember where Cordell is at.
I can't remember either, but I don't think he's in Atlanta. So it's Tyler Algier, right? Him and I forget the backup running back name. But if you're Zach Robinson, you're looking at it like, okay, this is clearly Bijan's backfield. Like, there's no doubt about that. Like, sorry, Tyler Algier, we're gonna give you a couple carries a game and spell him. But we're trying to make the playoffs, and if we're gonna make the playoffs, right? Who was it? Dick Vermeil's like playoffs. Like, if you're gonna make the playoffs, you gotta be able to feed your best players. And with Bijan being that guy, I expect him to get the bulk and majority of the touches. But I definitely think that Jahmyr Gibbs is just so talented, man. Like you said, and this is the truth, Keith. He's literally one of the most skilled runners in the league. Like, if you remember from our scouting meetings that the 2022, I, said, like, when I, watched him, I was like, he's a guy that can navigate 5 o'clock traffic. Like, if you're going to drive a Ferrari, you're not going to have fun in 5 o'clock traffic. It's bumper to bumper. But if you know how to navigate and you can get out in front of the pack and open it up, you can have a good time. And he's that type of guy that can move around in tight, condensed spaces and get into daylight. And when he gets into daylight, his burst is elite. Like, his acceleration, everything is just unreal. So I would love to see him as that RB1 in terms of full touches. But I just want to see him get the ball more in the passing game, and not just more because he got it enough. But yeah, like, just check down stuff. Now, let me get some deep targets with him. Let's motion him out pre-snap. Oh, it's man to man. I got a 240-pound linebacker on him. Yeah, I'm running the slot fade. Like, what I'm saying? If I'm Jared Goff, I'm calling that. Check, kill. Let me get that slot fade going. And let me go ahead and throw that ball, because if I got one-on-one, I'm taking Jahmyr Gibbs, tracking the ball down the field, and outrunning this 240-pound, 230-pound linebacker who's probably not the best trying to cover man-to-man rather than dropping off in zone. These two backs are always going to be tied together, and it's crazy. They're both 22 years old, born in the same year, drafted close together, and their numbers are very close from last year as well. Just 2 elite caliber running backs, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree 100% with DP. Let's keep this thing going and flowing real quick. Sure, no. We wonder what Cordell Patterson is. Cordell Patterson is with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, DP. But we're gonna keep this state going.
Probably would never hear from him in there over there. But
we'll keep this state going in Florida, man. And we're gonna talk about some. We're gonna pick some off the radar guys, right? That didn't have necessarily great year two situation, or just other guys that we think will really perform really well this upcoming year. So coming up next, man, we're gonna have this conversation after Bijan, after Jahmyr. Who is up next in that RB3 situation for year two running backs of the 2023 NFL draft class?
Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Keith, I think when you talk about the next guy behind Jahmyr and Bijan, I think it's got to be at least off of last year. It's got to be Devon Achane from the Miami Dolphins, right? Like 103 carries, 800 yards rushing, almost 8 yards per attempt, 8 rushing touchdowns, 27 receptions, 197 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. And this was a big play maker for that Dolphins track team we call offense that they have down in South Beach, right? And I think it was the Denver game. That was a game where it was just like, what is going on? 18 carries, 203 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, averaging over 11 yards per rush. He just created big play after big play. I think the question for me is, because he still did all that while Raheem Mostert was still there. You add Jalen Wright out of Tennessee to this backfield, and you're wondering, all right, so who, like, because Jalen Wright's going to take carries from somebody. And I won't even say it's this year specifically, but like, I think he could, depends on how training camp, right? We start that in a couple of weeks, training camp, and then preseason. If he's killing it in camp and in preseason, Mike McDaniels will get this young man the rock in the regular season and kind of operate like a 3-headed monster in the running back situation. But I think Devon Achane may have probably the clearest path to be that RB3 from the 2023 class heading into 2024.
Yeah, and I forgot. I think it was our guy Travis Wingfield. He was talking about a camp, and I forgot the comp that he had for Devon Achane, just talking about how he can have a really, really big year this year, but like just glowing reviews with him coming out of camp. Mm-hmm. I think Devon Achane is going to be an interesting case study, right? Talking about an undersized back, speedy guy who didn't necessarily have a lot of production in college. I thought he was good and they operated in flashes, right? But there was reason to be hesitant about him in his transition to the NFL. But if he comes together, right, gets it together, and he has a really big year for Miami, I think it's going to be a very interesting case study. It's going to send a lot of talent evaluators kind of back to the drawing board, right? Of evaluating running backs. What do we do with these speedy guys? And if this is just where the NFL is with running backs, right? We talked about the NFL being a spacing game. So now are we even pushing the threshold even more with smaller backs, just guys that can run in between the tackles, things like that? I think it'd be for an interesting conversation because we've seen it with wide receivers, right? Long are the days of, hey, needing the X wide receiver or needing 3 X wide receivers that's just big, 6'3", 230-pound guys. We have guys like Tank Dell that are on the verge of being Pro Bowl type wide receivers who are 160 pounds. DP, my pick, I went with 2 layups, DP. Now, this one I'm pulling up from 30. This one I am pulling up from 30, man. And in the essence of, we've been watching, the HBO stuff has been out, right? There's been some talk of Saquon Barkley. I am going to go with Eric Gray, the running back from Oklahoma. They brought in Devin Singletary, but I think Eric Gray is a very skilled running back, and I feel that he's going to have the workload. Right now, the question is, how good will this offensive line be? Would it be able to figure out the Evan Neal situation, get him in position to be a very productive player? But I think Devin Singletary is a talented player, and I believe that Devin Singletary is the guy they brought in. I'm pretty sure, right? Cool. And so, good football player, but I don't know if he's good enough to prevent Eric Gray from taking snaps from him, right? And I think Eric Gray is talented enough to get those snaps. I think he's much more talented than where he was drafted. I think he's more talented than what his consensus was as far as his overall name and hype coming out of college. So he's a name, DP, that I like a lot as far as being off the radar, but a guy that can jump in and expect to potentially be an RB3 with his situation with the New York Giants.
No, I like that name pull, Keith, because, this was a guy that we both like coming out. He was that all-purpose back too. He caught the ball out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
He ran the ball well. Ran with good speed, ran behind his pads. And it's like, okay, with Saquon Barkley gone, and yeah, Devin Singletary had a good season last year with the Texans, but no one really expected that. And one thing I always say is like, when expectations are high, that's when you really see who's going to rise to the occasion. Because when we don't expect anything from you and you pop, it's like, okay, great. Like that was an unexpected surprise. But what happens when defenses are now keying in on you, right? When you break the huddle, and if you are RB1, how different does it feel to now be the guy that they say, okay, first and second down, or especially first down when they want to run the ball, we know it's you. And for me, I think that Eric Gray is absolutely talented enough to take snaps, and he being a younger player, right? 24 years old, Devin Singletary to be 27, things like that. I just think about the fact of we haven't seen consistency with Devin Singletary either throughout his career. So, okay, we had a great year last year with CJ Stroud throwing the ball, with Nico, all the receiving weapons where, hey, defensively, you're probably last on the priority list on slowing down, where we got all these receivers, even Dalton Schultz being the problem in the middle of the field at tight end, right? Like, you were probably the last thing to worry about. I think Eric Gray has a real shot to take snaps from him. And man, we fast forward week 10, 12, 13, and then it's the Eric Gray show in the backfield, because all it takes is getting those carries in the early part of the season, showing, like Kendrick said, pop out and show folks. You know what I mean? Like, just go out there and showcase your ability and bring, because what they talked about, where's our big plays going to come from? Where's our explosive touches and stuff now that Saquon's gone? I think Eric Gray can bring that, Keith, but a guy that I think needs to do more in next year when he gets his touches was one of my guys coming in, Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby had a rough season last year, 50 carries, 132 yards. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, 2.6 yards per. He had 2 fumbles, and he lost both.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? And I remember listening to Doug Peterson at the Combine last year. That's rough, man. Doug Peterson said, I want to have multiple bodies in my backfield. I want to run multiple running backs. And he had more of a plan of making Travis Etienne that explosive space player where he's not running as much, you know what I mean? Especially between the tackles, that's not his game. He's more zone, toss, sweep, get on the perimeter. Yeah, and he's developed himself as a receiver too. So I want to see Tank Bigsby, when you get these touches, man, I want you to come into camp. And I know his personal RB coach, shout out to Coach Lester. Like, he trains him well. Like, Tank is supremely talented. Like, he knows how to get it done. Now it's like, okay, maybe the speed of the game was too much for him. Maybe it was just like, man, like, big bright lights, rookie. These NFL players are fast, right? I come from the SEC, but these are grown men, and this is their job, right? But maybe he takes that step this year where they can start, like, kind of, if you could, I would like for him to be the David Montgomery to Travis Etienne's Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Be that powerhouse that they need on those short yardage situations, split the carries, things like that. And then in your neck of the woods, Keith, Kendre Miller. You know what I mean? Alvin Kamara is still a baller, but I think he's on the last year of his contract. If I'm Dennis Allen, I want to see what I have in Kendre Miller so I know how we proceed going into next offseason.
Yeah, I agree. And I like both of those names. And lastly, that Kendre Miller one, for the New Orleans Saints, right? That's something that you have to hit on. I mean, because that Trevor Penning, then you go Kendre Miller, right? And then, Isaiah Foskey. It's been some draft situations where, people are going to kind of look and be like, hey, just as great as that 2017, I think that draft was that the Marshawn Lattimore, Alvin Kamara, like as much as they hit that one out the park, there have been some questionable picks after that. But DP, you know what you can't question, man? You can't question the content over here at the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to say shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day, man. If you can hear my voice, go hit that like button. Make sure you comment on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel over at Locked On NFL Draft. I am Keith Sanchez. You can follow me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. Like we like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube. Wherever you listen to podcasts, get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydays. On tomorrow's episode, we're going to keep this train going. We're talking wide receivers. Which year 2 wide receivers? Jordan Addison, JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, All those guys, Quentin Johnston. Who's going to be the best receiver going into year 2 for 2024? We're going to talk about that on tomorrow's show. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.